A group of beautiful yet troubled 20-somethings rebuild her life after she is most understanding in bars.
Somebody write this.
Hi, and welcome to Somebody Write This, where we use a random plot generator to give us an idea and then brainstorm how that could be a thing somebody might want to write. I'm Hannah.
And I'm Jenny, and here to help with us our brainstorming, today we have Esme Symes-Smith. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Hi, we are super excited to have you here. As we were talking before the show about what we might want to cover in our interview, you had told us that one of your favorite things is using genre to talk about heavy things and heavy topics. So I'm going to first of all, just kind of open the floor wide and let you kind of jump in and talk about your experience with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Esme. I'm a middle grade author of the Sir Callie series, which is a series of 4 books about a non-binary kid who wants to be a knight in a very gendered world. And I've been lucky enough to be able to dig into all the sucky parts of being a kid and being pretty powerless in an adult's world. So this is one of my favorite things to talk about. I started when I was 12 in fan fiction of Harry Potter, which we don't talk about anymore, but it's fine. And I always used fiction as very much an escape as a reader, for sure. But when I discovered that I loved telling stories and writing, it was such a cool way for me to be able to process what was going on in my life, in my brain, in a very, very safe way. I've always viewed genre fiction, especially fantasy, as kind of it's almost like a veneer, like a veil between, reality and fiction. And, you have the choice to either reach through it and touch those hard things, or, you could just absorb it as fantasy. So I was able to work out a lot of hard things that was going on in my life without even realizing I was doing it. So that's always what's really drawn me to fantasy and genre writing in general. And when I became an author, that was always what I wanted to do. I wanted to tell these difficult, very relatable stories, but in the safe space of magic and dragons and swords. I feel like historical fiction does a similar thing, but fantasy can take it one step further with because magic is always a metaphor for something, which is super cool. So yeah, that's how I started. And I love contemporary fiction, especially middle grade, so much, but sometimes it feels a little bit too close for comfort. I definitely find myself putting down those books to take a breather way more than I do with genre fiction, where, if something feels very, very scary, you can go back into that sort of magical fictional world, just be like, okay, this is fine. This isn't real. Even if those hard things are going into your brain and helping you think about it even more.
I really like that, pointing out that there is that distance where even if it's still tackling some of the harder stuff, there is that you can always remind yourself this is made up, this is fictional, this world does not exist.
Yeah, exactly. And you can do those hard conversations within fantasy and genre fiction, especially in kidlit. I know often people think that you have to dumb it down for kids or make it less intense, but that's really not the case. Kids need those hard stories, and I think doing those things within fantasy is such a good way to help those readers in a way that I was helped with fan fiction. So that's really my intention with my writing.
Yeah. So let me ask, as you start writing these kinds of stories, I ask partly because I've been delving lately into a similar thing of exploring big issues through mostly supernatural horror. And so
yes,
again, that fantasy
it.
realm. So I've been experimenting with plays in that. And so for you, as you write this, which aspect of this comes to is the inspiration first? Is it, I want to tackle this subject, or I want this world? And which one comes first and informs the rest of it?
It's really I want to play in this world and I want to have a good time, which is ironic. When I first wrote the first Callie book, it was in 2020 and we just got into the Panini, and I was just feeling so miserable because my work shut down. I was on submission with a book that didn't sell. And, you can't solve the pandemic. So I was just feeling very hopeless and loose-ended. And I was like, what brings me joy? What haven't I done before? And I went back to the Tamora Pierce books, which I always loved as a kid. okay, I'm gonna write a story about a Bolshoi kid who wants to be a knight. And I just finished reading The Prince and the Dressmaker, which is a graphic novel, and it was so beautiful. And it was all about this soft prince who's like exploring his gender and this girl who helps him. So I had those two characters in my brain, and I had Callie just really sprung up out of nowhere. But they're the kind of kid who, isn't going to take no for an answer. They're not just going to sit down and be like, okay, I'm going to obey these stupid rules, even though they're dumb, So Callie was really like a vessel for me to find a little bit more control in this control-less world, because I feel like the 2020 pandemic really made me feel those big feelings that I felt as a child, where like, you're seeing all the problems in the world, but you're completely helpless to stop it. So like grasping for those little more personal things to kind of give you a sense of control and power, even if it's small, was really important. And book one was supposed to be a retrospective on like the Trump era. And it was supposed to be like, oh, haha, look how terrible this was, moving on. But as I was writing book two, and as I've been writing the subsequent Callie books, it's been feeling very, very current. So I have been a lot more intentional about themes and the issues that I tackle, especially regarding like queer adults with children, all those things, and the way that people just really like fear what they don't know. And, fear makes people so scared and dangerous if it's not processed correctly. So that was really, I feel like the subsequent Callie books are a lot more intentional. But in the beginning, it was just supposed to be fun.
I really love this. I hope people subscribe to our Patreon so that they can hear the rest of that conversation, because they're only going to hear a tiny piece of it. So $2 a month, that's all you need. Hear the rest of that conversation. So with that, we are going to jump into our brainstorming. So as a reminder, the plot we're starting with, which I had quite a time trying to understand, a group of beautiful yet troubled 20-somethings rebuild her life after she is most understanding in bars.
Oh, I love it. I was so excited. All right.
Yeah.
let's get this.
Yeah. So what immediately jumps out to you, Esme? Questions? What's the most confusing or exciting or let's start here moment of this prompt?
So it's definitely looking at, the multiple as it comes to like the troubled 20-somethings, plural, but rebuilding her life is singular. Yeah. So I'm thinking like this group is separate to the her that we're looking at. So I'm kind of imagining this woman, I don't know how old she is, but like she's in the bar and she's just like this. She's a very positive, hopeful person. And she's there on her own. She's just vibing. She likes to be around company. And then you have this this group of beautiful, troubled 20-somethings who are just going like, oh God, I don't know what I'm doing in my life. I'm nearly 25 and I haven't done anything yet. Oh my God. They're drinking a lot of wine, just going, oh, I'm having a midlife crisis at 25. And she's just like, listen, girls, come on. Let me tell you about my life. So that's what I'm imagining.
Yeah. Nice. And then somehow her life is falling apart. So in a way.
Her life was falling apart, but now she's very content. I feel like she went through a lot up until the time she was like 60. And now she's like, okay, well, I've divorced 3 husbands. My children are in Australia or whatever. I'm on my own, but I'm really, I'm enjoying my retirement and this is the life I like. And, I have friends, but I also like being on my own. So she goes out to these places by herself and just like takes in the atmosphere and the people. And she's the kind of person that just likes talking to people, regardless of whether they want to be spoken to.
I love her already.
And I imagine she wears like very, very fabulous clothes, lots of purple because, when I'm an old woman, I'll wear purple and all that. And like feathers and jewels and like all the things that she's accumulated. And she just really enjoys herself.
Every item of clothing she has a story behind it, where she got it and who she was with. And
whether it's true or not, like she definitely
Oh, I love that.
I imagine it kind of like Alexis Rose from Schitt's Creek with...
Yes. That is Alexis Rose, 40 years later.
Yeah, she's like, I was in this Persian palace and I got kidnapped, but it's fine.
Exactly. So I love this character.
Yes.
So there is she the one whose life they're the 20-somethings are rebuilding?
Oh, no. She's helping the 20-somethings rebuild her life. Like, she knows what's going on. She's fine. It's the 20-somethings that are having their like ultimate midlife crisis at like 24, 25.
Okay, so they're each of so the her life is their life, each individually.
Yes. Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, I like that too. And maybe they're like focusing on like one friend who's going through this like really like kind of minor breakup, but it feels huge because she had this whole life plan, and now her boyfriend of like 3 months has dumped her when she thought she was going to spend the rest of her life with this guy, but actually it was complete, you know what? So she's just like, oh God, I might as well just jump off a cliff right now. And they're just like, listen, Jenny, it's going to be okay. Even though everyone else is like having those like very minor problems that feel huge. And then, you know, this woman comes in and she's just like, yes, I was kidnapped in Saudi Arabia and lived there under captive for like 20 years. Like, your problems are nothing. Let me tell you about them.
So that's how they all meet her, is they, you know, it'll be fine. Let's go get a drink. And then there's this lady sitting at the bar with like, you know, feathers in her hat. First of all, she's wearing a hat. You know?
She's already out of sync for the world. Yeah.
20 strings of pearls.
Yeah. Yes. I love her already. She's amazing.
I guess I'm curious about the structure of this. Is this a series of vignettes within the bar where every time they have a different problem and then she comes in and she's like, here's what's going on? Or is there
like an after school special with booze?
Are we following them primarily? And she kind of pops in and out like a magical fairy godmother?
I imagine it is a collection of short stories, really. But they're all tied together by this one narrative of this woman in the bar this evening with these group of people. So, like, it's a very short timeline, but, you know, she tells these stories and they're kind of almost like fairy tales.
I'm very curious about the woman herself.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So she has some stories that are very, like, you know, very kind of normal and relatable, and that's what she starts off with. And then they get like, subsequently more insane.
So there is like a building arc throughout throughout these individual stories that there is like, you know, first you think it's all just know, cute little standalones, and then it gets maybe there's like a narrative to put together.
And then she's like, oh, well, it's like 2 a.m. It's like 2 a.m. I have to go back to let my dog out. And then they realize that no one else can.
Or I want the last story in the collection to be from her point of view.
Exactly.
And like, you know, maybe we realize that, nothing she has said has been true. But it's all like greatly changed these people's lives.
Yeah. Or maybe she like goes home to like her husband who's watching NCIS on the couch with like 3 Cokes or whatever. Yeah. She's just like, I had a great night.
It's just what she does.
Yeah. He's like, all right, glad you're home.
I love the fairy godmother idea.
Yeah, like all of her grandchildren have like grown up or like are busy with their own lives. She's just like, I need to put this energy somewhere.
Yeah.
Or like they're so sick of her nonsense and her stories that they don't really like listen anymore. So she needs to go find new people to be like, let me tell you.
Like, and this is not the direction we have to go, but like this absolutely could be something that if we went that way, that there could be a, you know, maybe she doesn't have a great relationship with her kids. And she feels like she let them down when they were in their 20s. And so now she's kind of like trying to, maybe she's making up these wild stories because she's like, I think I could say this and it would help them. And it's not true, but I don't care because I think it could be useful to them. Could have the moment at the end where they're like almost like the end of The Music Man, where they realize that he has been lying to them the whole time, but it doesn't matter because he actually changed their lives and like made them more positive and optimistic.
What if? Okay. How about this?
So
what if she wasn't trying to help them? What if she was telling these stories to mess them up more, but they ended up helping? And she's like, "Dang it, that's not what I meant to do."
Or maybe she's an escaped convict, and she's been like, you know, embedded in these terrible crimes of like, you know, embezzlement and stuff like that. And she's on the run, and then the police come and they're like, "Have you seen this woman?" And it's like, "Oh my god,
she stands out like a sore thumb."
And so, like we could do some really fun things with like these things that she, you know, maybe she shows up wearing something that she, you know. She had to cobble together an outfit from like random things she found, like that she stole or found somewhere, and then she just puts a story together about why does this cowboy hat have feathers? Well, obviously it's because. And so like we have these little clues.
Yeah, it's from that ostrich that I found in the desert once.
Exactly.
There's so many possibilities for this lady.
She's like hiding in plain sight. I know. I'm obsessed.
So,
I love her.
Before we get too much further into figuring out the details, I think we need to get a title in case it veers us all off track.
All right.
So we'll hope. I think anything we get can probably be tied into her story in some way.
Yes.
So I think we'll be okay. All right. So this is an ugly title for a book. As most of them are. But our title, I'm going to put it in the chat. Oh, it also has two. I have to fix the grammar, but I will tell you what the original was. So our title is Jake Jones and the Close of World War II.
Okay.
Oh my God, stop.
It initially, by the way, was and the close of World War II, which was, we can fix that. So there's war stories in here.
Okay. I see that. Jake Jones is the soldier she was once in love with.
Okay,
and she was instrumental in finishing World War II. She went undercover in her ostrich feather hats and won the war. And that's just one of her stories.
I like it.
But I love the idea as well that like maybe some of these wild stories are coming out because like not pathological liar as well, but like maybe there are pieces of this that she actually can't tell because it's classified information about
it as a story.
But she tells it as a story and she adds other details and she's like, this is no longer about the war. This is about, that random person who I met and fought off when they were trying to rob a convenience store. This is who we're talking about now. So she has to spin it a little bit to actually be able, but she needs to get her stories out because she's been sitting with this for years and years and years and has nobody to talk to about it.
Or maybe Jake Jones is her cat. I can see that.
I also do love the idea that maybe she's spinning all these stories about Jake Jones and it turns out to be her cat.
He's just like the protagonist in all of her fairy tales.
So she gets home to her husband watching TV and she's like, did you feed Jake? And the reader's like, what?
Jake Jones just comes out of my mouth. And it's always Jake Jones and never Jake.
Yeah. No, it's Jake Jones. There was one of my like very, very first early attempts at National Novel Writing Month. I wrote a character named Matthew Danick, and the joke was that it was based around the premise. It was a rom-com where Matthew Danick was the aloof movie star who, in most stories, the girl would fall in love with and be swept off her feet by. But in my version, she ran off with the comedic relief best friend.
Yes,
because that's what I always wanted.
That's amazing.
But part of the gimmick was that he was only ever called Matthew Danick because he would not allow first names only. He was too formal.
Those characters are my favorite characters.
So yeah, Jake Jones, the mystery, and so all these stories, all her stories revolve around Jake Jones and the things that he did that they did together.
So like partners in crime.
Yeah.
And had this like amazing romance and.
Yeah. So how do these stories about intrigue and adventure in World War II with a friend / lover, whatever she spins Jake Jones as, how is this helpful to the 20-somethings?
Oh, it's not at all. I think what she's going for is like she's trying to put their like silly little 20-something problems into perspective. Like, actually, like, none of this actually matters. I actually ended World War II, and that was a much bigger deal, but I survived, so you can too, so shut up. But she says it much nicer than that.
Yeah, she's most understanding.
Very understanding.
But does it work for them? Does it work for all of them? They're all like, oh, I guess you're right, and their lives are rebuilt? Or is there one outlier who's like, this woman is crazy? Like, this woman is absolutely making this all up. This woman doesn't know what she's talking about. We should not be listening to her.
I think they're all just like in shock that this woman exists in the first place, and like they listen to her stories just like with open mouths, like not knowing how to process it. But then they go home and they think about it a little bit more. They're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I can change my life now.
Well, and then I like the idea that in this continued short story realm that we could start and it could be elaborate or not. It could be elaborated on or not. But we start to see, by story 5, we see the results of story 1's protagonists and where they've landed. New people come into the group because they've been, people have found love or have reconciled with someone or have made a good friend, and they bring them in, and other people leave because they, realize that they're not, other people in the group are like, you are not treating us well. And we don't really want
to. It's like all the stories like connect to like one of the 20 somethings.
Yeah.
And like, how do you know this about me? Like, that's creepy. Like,
oh my gosh.
It's so hard.
What if she never has any idea about their problems? She just happens to spin a yarn about Jake Jones and World War II, and they just either they all happen to connect, or when you're like really searching for an answer to something, and everything that someone says seems to be like, that must be it. Everything's a sign.
Oh my God. It's like tarot. Yes.
Yeah. It could be that, where they're like, they changed their lives because of something this woman said that was not actually connected at all.
I'm loving this idea of like a Facebook group or something where like, have you talked to this woman too? That's
they all maybe some of them meet her individually at the bar, and then they all start gathering at the bar to meet her. And be like, what will she tell us today to spin our lives?
And the bartender's like, woohoo!
More rounds, more whiskey, because she only drinks whiskey.
Yeah.
And she starts getting her drinks for free because she's bringing in the customers.
Exactly.
And then her husband has to come pick her up. Like, hey.
Ethel, for crying out loud.
Maybe that's the final scene, is that like, she said she said she doesn't have a husband. She lives alone. She's given them a completely different name for herself. Right. And then he shows up and is like, whatever. And like, what has she been telling you like this time? And takes her home.
Goodness. Oh, he's like really like into it too. And he just like supports her in all things.
Oh, there you go. He comes in and ands her all the way.
Yes, for sure.
I like that. That's even better. And she goes home to her regular home, and she was like, yeah, that was a really good day. That was a really good story I told. That was fun.
He's like, that's great. I'm glad you had a good time.
Exactly. He's like, well, tell it to me. And she sits down and tells him the story again, and that's how it ends.
And Jake Jones is on her lap.
And Jake Jones is curled up on her lap, purring.
Yes.
So this is adorable. And it's such a different story than most of the ones we've written.
Yeah.
Oh, really? We'd have to listen to more.
Yeah, no, we often delve into like sci-fi is where it goes a lot of the time. But I really like
Supernatural, or
Supernatural. So I really like this like little vignette story of just like relationships and the weird coincidences that can happen in relationship.
And it's just cozy.
I love characters. It's so fun.
Mm-hmm. It feels like it reminds me, not quite, but like a lot of those. It's got the coziness of like a PG Woodhouse kind of where it's the same characters every time. And we do get a little bit of change in this one, but like they show up and it's almost sometimes even a formula where you know the kinds of stories they're going to tell, their catchphrases, but it's just so cozy to read.
Yes, it's like if Alexis Rose was in a PG Woodhouse.
Yes, that is our pitch, our pitch comparison. It's Alexis Rose in a PG Woodhouse story.
Amazing. 50 years later.
50 years later, it's 60-year-old Alexis Rose as Jeeves. All right, well, that is our time. So listeners, we absolutely want somebody to write this.
Yes.
Tell us one of these stories. Tell us one of the 20-somethings. Spin a story from this wonderful woman about Jake Jones and the close of World War II. And of course, I like the idea if this is in modern times and she's like 60. I love the idea that at some point, one of them is like, obviously she couldn't have actually been alive during World War II.
Details. Listen.
And they're like, whatever, it doesn't matter. But
shut up, Sandra.
She changed my life. I love this. So with that, we're gonna move into our final segment where we're gonna recommend something. And you know what? In the vein of this, we've compared it a couple times. I'm going to recommend the P.G. Wodehouse books are fun, but I also want to recommend the Jeeves and Wooster TV series, which was a short-run TV series starring Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie as
I love them.
They're so perfectly cast in the series.
They really are.
And it's very. We recently watched it, and there's an episode or two that doesn't age so well, but most of them, that happens so often with older media. But a lot of it is really fun and really cozy and very silly, and it follows the same formula every time. But that's part of the charm. So if you get a chance to find it, the Jeeves and Wooster series, I think it's 4 seasons of 4 episodes each or something. It's British TV show length, and it's well worth checking out. It is so much fun.
Yes.
Jenny, let me ask you, what would you like to recommend this week?
This week, I watched a movie on Netflix called Narvik, and it is about a town of the same name, way up in northern Norway, where during World War II, incidentally,
Jake Jones.
Jake Jones. No. This town was important in World War II because Sweden was producing a lot of iron that was being bought both by the Allies and the Axis. And Narvik was the Norwegian port where those would get shipped out. And so it's the hometown of one of the soldiers, and these soldiers show up to help with, they call it neutrality. But they find out that the Germans are just suddenly taking over. And so, the one soldier, and he has his wife and his young son and his father that he lives with, and how they deal with this invasion. And it's a really, really great war flick. And I liked watching it in the original language with subtitles because, they're speaking Norwegian, but then some people are speaking German and some people were speaking French. And I liked to hear the difference instead of just hearing all English. Anyway, excellent flick. Go check it out.
Awesome. All right, Esme, you get to recommend something as well. What's a story you think our listeners should check out?
Well, I was going to recommend Our House because I'm obsessed with it. It's on Disney Plus and it's amazing. But given the shenanigans of our story, I want to recommend Only Murders in the Building.
Yes,
it's on. It's so good. It's on Hulu, and it's about these 2 older guys who live in this beautiful apartment building in New York City. And they've lived their lives. And one of them is an old actor. The other one's a director of plays. And then is it Selena Gomez?
Yeah.
Is that her? Yeah, and then Selena Gomez comes along, and she's just this, jaded 20-something, and they form this little trio, and all the shenanigans because, of course, there are murders in the building, so they make a podcast. Trying to solve these murders. It's so good. It's so funny. I love it.
It's and for any of you, I'm assuming if you're listening to this, you listen to podcasts. It absolutely is so funny in tackling the wealth of true crime podcasts and how messy.
So I feel like that would be a really good comp for Jake Jones in the close of WW2.
Yeah. Only Murders in the Building. Absolutely. Oh, it's fantastic. All right. Before we go, Esme, we want to make sure that you can plug yourself and your work. We've talked a little bit about the Sir Callie books, but is there anything else you want to direct listeners to if they want to read more of your stuff?
Well, those are the only books I have out right now. Sir Callie Champions of Hellsting came out last year. It's available in hardcover and paperback as well as digital. And then Sir Callie and the Dragon's Roost book 2 is out now in hardback. The next one comes out next year, and the next one comes out the next year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can find me on esimesmith.com. That's the best place to find me because Twitter is trash right now.
Yeah, I've fully migrated over to Blue Sky and trying to do that. But yeah, absolutely. Esme, thank you so much for joining us for this. This was a really delightful one.
This was so much fun. I had such a good time. I'm glad we worked out our shenanigans.
All right, folks, that is our episode. As a reminder, you can find us every other Thursday, wherever you get your podcasts, including on YouTube. And you can join our Patreon for bonus material. Today, we especially want to thank our patron, Mark, for supporting us.
Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at WriteThisPod or on Facebook /SomebodyWriteThis. And if you've been inspired by this episode and have questions or comments or a short story or anything else, email us at somebodywritethis@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you.
We'll be back with another episode in 2 weeks, and we'll see you then.
And as they say, when your son's beard has grown, shave your own.